Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today in person or online for today's Ocean Protection Council meeting, and happy leap year. Leap day in the leap year. Just before we start with opening remarks, if I could ask Stacy if you could call the roll, please.
Thank you. Katy Landau.
Here.
Christina Kunkel.
Here.
Senator Ben Allen.
Catherine Moore here for Senator Allen.
Thank you, Catherine. Assemblymember Dawn Addis. Alexis Jackson.
Here.
Megan Rocha.
Here.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So again, just welcome to everybody. Secretary Crowfoot is currently in DC today and so is unable to join us. And also Secretary Yana Garcia sends her apologies for being unable to join. So I'm happy to be here today, both on behalf of Secretary Garcia and serve as the acting chair for today's meeting on behalf of Secretary Crowfoot. Today, we're also joined by Christina Kunkel, delegate for the State Controller, Malaya Cohen. This is the Controller's first meeting, as it's the first meeting of the year. Just as a reminder, the State Controller serves on the Council as chair of the State Lands Commission, and that position on this Council alternates every year between the State Controller and the Lieutenant Governor. So welcome, Christina, on behalf of the State Controller. Finally, I am pleased to be joined in person today by Council members Alexis Jackson and Catherine Moore, who is participating for a portion of today's meeting on behalf of Senator Ben Allen. And we are joined remotely by Council members Megan Rocha, Senator Ben Allen, and Assemblymember Dawn Addis. And so with that, Christina, I just want to provide the opportunity to say any opening remarks on behalf of the Controller.
Sure, I appreciate that, Chair Landau. Thank you for the warm welcome. Controller Cohen is thrilled to serve on the council this year. She's disappointed she was unable to attend this first meeting, but I'm personally honored to return to the council for my second year now representing Controller Cohen. The Controller served on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, representing the Bayview Hunters Point district, where she still resides. She grew up in San Francisco, surrounded by the ocean and the bay, and she takes great pride in protecting these resources for all Californians. She is passionate about environmental justice, equitable climate adaptation, and meaningful coordination and collaboration with tribal governments, all aligned with the Council's strategic initiatives. So thank you for the opportunity to briefly introduce the Controller. She is honored to serve this year, and thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So as always with the OPC meetings, we have a full agenda. So we're going to first receive a presentation on OPC's annual Coast and Ocean Report, and then we'll be making decisions today to advance modeling of ocean acidification on the Central Coast, develop an intertidal biodiversity DNA barcode library, reduce the risk of whale and sea turtle entanglement in fishing gear, and continue OPC's ongoing partnership with the California Sea Grant Fellowship Program. Just as a reminder that we will be taking public comment on after items 4 through 7 with comment on non-agenda issues on item 9. I will invite public comment after each of those items. If you wish to make a comment and are attending in person, please line up at the podium. We will take in-person public comment first. After all of the in-person attendees have spoken, we will then take public comment from those who are joining us virtually. If you are joining us virtually through Zoom, please raise your virtual hand and we will unmute you, announce your name, and you will be able to provide your comment to the council. If you have called into the meeting via telephone, press #2 to raise your hand. Depending on how you have accessed the meeting, you may also need to unmute yourself. As a reminder, public comment is limited to 2 minutes each. There will be a timer on the screen to track your allotted time. And anyone interested in providing comment will need to raise their hand by the end of the agenda presentation. Hands raised after that time will not be placed in the queue for comment. And then lastly, please, I would like to welcome any comments or updates from any members of the council? Just checking out for our virtual attendees. Okay, hearing none, I will, Jen, if you could please provide an update.
Thank you so much, and thank you for chairing our meeting today. I also want to extend my welcome to Controller Cohen on the council this year and thank Councilmember Kunkel for joining us today. This meeting marks our first of 2024, and I'm really excited about the work that this council, OPC staff, and our partners will do together this year. Our annual Coast and Ocean Report, which we will hear more about from Dr. Kimball on item 4, provides an incredible summary of our work, impactful work in 2023, and we are certainly continuing that momentum even in the first 2 months of this year. Excuse me. Before I begin my report, I would like to draw attention to the revised staff recommendation for item 7 that was posted yesterday, which reflects an increased budget to support the purchase of additional ropeless gear as part of the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation's existing gear library. You will hear more details on that item during Katy's series presentation under item 7. I will begin my report with an update on our budget and then shift to programmatic and personnel updates. As many are aware, California is facing a significant budget shortfall, last projected by the Legislative Analyst's Office to be approximately $73 billion. To address this shortfall, the governor's proposed 2024-25 budget includes a range of solutions that strive to balance administration priorities. This includes a $35 million reduction in our 23-24 general fund appropriation, which was directed to OPC for coastal and marine ecosystem resilience priorities, and a reduction of $25 million for our SB1 sea level rise adaptation planning program, a total reduction of $60 million. The proposed budget also includes a reduction of $392 million to the Coastal Conservancy for coastal resilience adaptation and restoration efforts. The budget maintains $660 million of the previously committed $1.3 billion over multiple years in programs and projects for coastal resilience. Shifting to programmatic efforts, I have a few updates on our sea level rise work. For our update on sea level rise guidance, the updated guidance was released on January 19th. Following release, we initiated public outreach, including presentations at the Coastal Commission, State Lands Commission, and the Bay Conservation and Development Commission. We hosted a public webinar and 4 virtual regional workshops to provide a broad overview of the policy recommendations and science and to solicit feedback on the draft. We have met with the Coastal Commission's Sea Level Rise Local Working Group to solicit further local input, and we will continue to solicit feedback from tribes through informal and formal government-to-government consultation. The public comment deadline was originally scheduled for March 4th on our guidance document. In response to requests for more time from state agency and external partners, we have extended this deadline to March 8th. Dr. Whiteman will share some additional scientific updates on this effort during her report. On December 15th, we officially launched our SB1 grant program, which will provide funding to local, regional, and tribal governments to develop sea level rise adaptation plans and projects. There is a high level of interest in this program, no surprise. And through our discussions with interested applicants, we've determined that requiring a letter of alignment from either the Bay Conservation or Development Commission or the Coastal Commission as part of our application process has the potential to delay application submittal and getting funding into the hands of local jurisdictions. In response, we will be updating the application to remove this requirement, and instead we'll use the application review process, which will include Coastal Commission and BCDC staff to ensure alignment with regulatory agency policies. Applications for this program are accepted on a rolling quarterly basis and are due March 22nd to be brought to the council for approval at our June meeting. Turning now to our environmental justice and equity work, on January 8th, OPC and our partners at Better World Group announced a call for applications to join a new environmental justice advisory board for California's coast and ocean. which will help advise the state on how to better address ocean and coastal needs of California communities. The goal of our Environmental Justice Advisory Board is to increase engagement with leaders representing environmental justice and tribal communities in alignment with OPC's equity plan, our tribal engagement strategy, and the equity goals in our strategic plan. The application deadline to join the Environmental Justice Equity Advisory Board was last Friday, and we anticipate the board's first meeting to occur in May of this year. OPC has also launched our $1 million Environmental Justice Small Grants Program in partnership with Justice Outside, who will develop, design, and steward this program through its Liberated Paths grant-making program in collaboration with the Coastal Conservancy. The goal of this program is to create more inclusive and accessible funding opportunities that increase community engagement across all of our work. Justice Outside has hosted 2 informational webinars in February to provide more information about this grant program, with another 2 scheduled on March 4th and March 15th. Webinar information can be found on our website. Applications for grants along the California coast open on March 11th and close on April 5th. And now for an update on our tribal affairs work. When the Ocean Protection Council's tribal engagement strategy was adopted last year, this council approved $1 million in funding to support small grants to tribal governments and tribally led organizations. We added this funding to CNRA's larger Tribal Nature-Based Solutions Grant Program to maximize reach and efficiencies for tribes and for the state. Full proposals for this program were due last Friday. OPC staff will now review proposals in collaboration with CNRA leadership to support projects that advance tribal priorities for the coast and ocean. Final awards using OPC funds will be scheduled for approval by the council at its June meeting. This last Tuesday, the governor's office hosted the annual California Tribal Nations Summit. During the summit, CNRA Deputy Secretary for Tribal Affairs announced a collaborative effort between CNRA and the Ocean Protection Council to initiate early consultation on tribally led stewardship, access, co-management, and ancestral land return. Feedback received through this early consultation will inform OPC's efforts to conserve 30% of California's coastal waters by 2030, including soliciting tribal input on potential approaches for designating and co-managing Indigenous marine stewardship areas. As part of our ongoing commitment to improve communication with tribes and consistent with our tribal engagement strategy, OPC staff prepared a consultation calendar that was shared at the Tribal Nations Summit and will be posted on our website. This calendar will forecast upcoming OPC consultation requests for 2024 to streamline consultation opportunities, reduce the burden of multiple consultation requests, and maximize tribal engagement in our work. Turning now to our work on 30 by 30. You will recall that the Ocean Protection Council, in partnership with Ocean Science Trust, has convened a technical advisory panel that will provide scientific guidance to inform our efforts to achieve 30 by 30 in coastal waters. Specifically, this panel has been tasked with developing objective science-based criteria to help evaluate which existing spatial management measures in California's coastal waters meet the definition and the intent of a 30 by 30 conserved area. This panel had held a kickoff in December and met again in January and February of this year to begin drafting criteria for evaluating potential 30 by 30 conserved areas. They will continue to meet over the next several months, and we anticipate scheduling an informational update on their progress at the June 4th council meeting. Draft criteria will be released for tribal consultation and public comment this summer, followed by a series of regional public workshops to solicit feedback. Finally, on 30 by 30, on March 12th, starting at 9:30, the Senate Natural Resources and Water Committee will hold an informational briefing on the progress towards achieving 30 by 30 in coastal waters. Secretary Crowfoot, Director Bonham from the Department of Fish and Wildlife, Dr. Whiteman, and I will participate on a panel to share the state's efforts to date and next steps. Turning now to offshore wind. The Ocean Protection Council continues to be deeply engaged in the state's offshore wind efforts. Led by the State Lands Commission, state agencies including the Coastal Commission, Department of Fish and Wildlife, Energy Commission, and OPC, collaborated to submit a joint letter on February 20th expressing the state's perspectives and feedback in response to the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management's notice of intent to prepare an environmental impact statement for our existing 5 offshore wind leases in California. For council and public awareness, there will be a public workshop held in this room on March 20th on the draft offshore wind strategic plan as mandated by AB 525. The agenda will be coming soon for this workshop, but it will provide an overview of the draft plan and its recommendations, and the state welcomes questions and feedback to inform the final strategic plan. The deadline for public comment on the plan has been extended to mid-April, exact date forthcoming, and adoption of the final plan by the Energy Commission is anticipated in May or June. Official launch of the effort to develop an environmental monitoring guidance for offshore wind occurred this month and includes the establishment of working groups of scientific experts focused on specific topics, including marine mammals and sea turtles, birds and bats, fish and fisheries, and habitats and ecosystems. In addition, we will establish contributor groups that include state, tribal, and federal governments, fishermen, NGOs, industry, and local communities. We want to ensure that tribal science is included in this work and are seeking tribal scientists to participate in this effort. If you are interested or have recommendations, we want to hear from you. Furthermore, we are initiating a focused effort to solicit input on tribal priorities for this environmental monitoring guidance, which will likely include workshops or listening sessions in the next few months. But as a starting place, we are hoping to provide an overview of this effort at the Energy Commission's Tribal Working Group meeting on March 7th. Quick update on our international work. In late April, the 4th session of the UN's Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee on Plastic Pollution will be held in Ottawa, Canada, to develop an internationally legally binding instrument to address plastic pollution. OPC staff are actively coordinating with interagency partners and the government of Quebec to explore California's role in this effort. Attendance by OPC and other state representatives will provide an opportunity for California to demonstrate subnational leadership on this issue and share concrete examples of actions to reduce plastic pollution. And finally, some personnel updates. I gave a quick update on this at our last meeting, but now that it's official, I would like to welcome Christine Sir to the OPC team. So if you can give a wave, Christine. Christine joined us on January 8th as our new Water Quality Program Manager and will lead our statewide and global policy work related to plastic pollution, harmful algal blooms, and other water quality threats to California's coast and ocean. She previously worked as a policy advisor to Congressman Jared Huffman and as a Canals Fellow at the House Committee on Natural Resources. She has also worked internationally, including as a Fulbright researcher studying coastal ecosystems in Indonesia and as the Ocean and Fisheries Policy Lead with the nonprofit RARE. We're so excited to have you with us. We are also delighted to welcome Connor Smith as our 2024 Sea Grant Fellow working in our biodiversity program. Give a wave. Connor comes to OPC from the UCSB Bren School of Environmental Science and Management, where his research focused on fisheries, MPAs, and environmental justice, with a focus on Indigenous community engagement and tribal co-management. Most recently, Connor has been working on exploring the nexus between MPAs and climate change in California, and Connor will support OPC priorities related to MPA management, tribal engagement, and kelp restoration. That concludes my executive director's report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I just want to open it up to the council members if anyone has any questions. Please.
Not as much questions as comments. Well, a couple of comments and then one kind of request, I think. So the first, obviously really disheartening to hear about the budget cuts and how they're realized for coasts and oceans. And I think it's just an important reminder to us as council members to think about how we're being more efficient with our allocations and how we're prioritizing those towards highest impact research and projects. The second is that it's really great to hear that California is looking for a way to engage in the UN Plastics Treaty. I think that their voice would be welcomed there, especially as they point to kind of concrete solutions and policies that could move forward the ambition of that treaty. And then the last one is is more a request. So really exciting that membership has gone out or membership request for the EJ Advisory Board. And wanting to make sure that we think about the timing of that meeting cadence with these council meetings to make sure that there's actually adequate time for us as council members to synthesize learnings from that EJ board if we want to actually actionize a lot of the work. So just, yeah, figuring out what the right lead up between meetings looks like.
Great, thank you so much. I just want to check any other council members, questions or comments? No? Great. Well, with that, I will invite Dr. Whiteman to provide the update from the Science Advisor.
Thank you, Chair Landau, council members, and happy Leap Day. Although today can sometimes feel transient because it only comes around once every 4 years. I am thrilled to be here representing a very non-transient, in fact, renewed and strengthened partnership between the science community that we connect to as Ocean Science Trust and Ocean Protection Council. And I hope that my updates to share today are a testament to the value in policy of the strong science connection and foundation that we have. So building on, or in some ways grounding, Jen's update on the sea level rise guidance, it has been a privilege to engage some of the top scientists in the field, and I will call out and acknowledge Dr. Ben Hamilton from NASA's JPL lab. I'm just going to keep calling out and acknowledging Ben Hamilton for his support and to us during this process. Among the other members of our science task force, all of whom have contributed a lot of time and expertise. Together, we've aspired to create a level science playing field in which we all can have a shared and updated understanding of the processes that contribute to sea level rise, how those are modeled and projected into the future, and where uncertainties exist. In addition, the science community has, over the last 5+ years, really engaged more fully with climate adaptation practitioners from across state, regional, local jurisdictions to improve the science frameworks built on that level playing field that can connect those complex computational models and future projections to real world and policy application. And you see that in the scenarios that are the heart of the science chapter 2 of the updated guidance. Those scenarios describe potential futures, the combinations of conditions that include things like social policy and emissions that will lead to those futures, and the ranges of sea level rise projections that would happen if one of those scenarios or as those which scenarios becomes reality. So the Science Foundation presented in Chapter 2, in combination with that in Chapter 4 of the Sea Level Rise Guidance, is aligned with the federal and national approach and is also being applied in multiple other US states. We're amongst a couple of other states that are really grappling with how to generate pragmatic policy guidance, actionable guidance on the basis of this science. And as we tackle that here in California, please know that we welcome your feedback on the science as well, in the sense that of making it a shared level playing field of understanding so that it can be the thing around which we can gather and have a shared conversation. Switching topics, I think it is really important for me to also highlight the work that we're conducting in partnership with Ocean Protection Council for advancing the vision and goals of 30 by 30. Ocean Protection Council is advancing multiple strategies on this issue for coastal waters, and each of these will benefit from clear science guidance to translate the policy objectives for 30 by 30 conserved areas, things such as durability, biodiversity benefits, effective management, into clear and objective criteria. So focusing in now on one of those strategies, as has been mentioned, criteria need to be developed to qualitatively or quantitatively assess the extent to which existing spatial management measures, so think of things like water quality protected areas or spatially based fishery management measures, meet or could potentially meet the definition of a 30 by 30 conserved area. We have convened an amazing group of science experts in a technical advisory panel to provide their advice and input and help us ensure that we have a rigorous science foundation to this important work. We actually convened yesterday with the group, and I know I can speak on behalf of both the OPC and OST teams in saying that we're so grateful to have their brains and perspectives on this with us. As has already been mentioned, we look forward to supporting OPC in sharing draft criteria this summer and launching opportunities for discussion and feedback with the broader community. So finally, just briefly looking forward, we're preparing to launch a process to develop an ocean and coast report card for California that can evaluate the health of California's coast and ocean ecosystems and inform the California public on the status and trends of key coastal marine social indicators. Anyone who has ever worked on report card processes knows how hard it is to select indicators that are actually telling you what you think they are telling you, particularly in a changing climate, to identify a limited feasible set for tracking into the future, and then use that information to communicate effectively and invest in data collection appropriately. So we have a big task ahead of us, and we're ready to roll up our sleeves and engage. And we are currently designing a collaborative process that can tap into the knowledge and expertise held in many different sectors, including the academic and broader science community, alongside state and federal agencies, and the many different monitoring and data collection programs along the coast. This will build upon the work that you'll hear about in your next agenda item. So I'm going to pause there and let Dr. Kimball pick this up next. So we look forward to engaging with and receiving input and feedback on all of our science-based work in support of the Ocean Protection Council through the rest of 2024. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Again, I want to just open it up to the council if there's any questions or comments for Dr. Whiteman. And hearing none, we'll move on to item 4, and I'll invite Justine Kimball up for the informational item on the 2023 Annual State Coast and Ocean Report. And with that, Dr. Kimball.
Thank you. Wait for my slides. Here we go. Next slide. Great. So just as a reminder, the annual State of the Coast and Ocean Report is a direct deliverable from our OPC strategic plan, target 3.6.1, which is to create an annual State of the Coast and Ocean Report starting in 2021 that both highlights strategic plan implementation and progress on critical issues, as well as builds to a comprehensive report card by 2025, utilizing a scientific indicator-based framework. And so you can see the previous beautiful covers from our annual reports in 2021, 2022, and I'll be presenting here on our 2023 report. Next slide. So similar to our 2021 and 2022 reports, we had a process for developing. Our 2021 report focused mainly on a retrospective of activities and accomplishments, but in the 2022, and as you'll see in this report, we built on that model and started to incorporate a suite of preliminary indicators that provide a snapshot of ocean health in California, as well as still includes that retrospective of activities and accomplishments. Next slide. So for this process, it was a very much a collective effort led by our OPC summer intern cohorts, OPC staff, a partnership with the West Coast Ocean Alliance, and consultation with the OPC Science Advisory Team. I'd say, the bulk of the work over the last year has really focused on the indicator piece. As Liz very nicely set up, it is not an easy thing to do. Indicators require high quality monitoring data that's spatially and temporally comprehensive, and then all the steps that she mentioned. So it's really a challenge to do it well. And so, we've we've taken a stab at it the last few years, and indicators included in this report, I think, represent a really important and critical first step, but we're not relying on them for final indicators that we plan on using for the 2025 report card, which you heard a little bit from Liz, and I'll talk more about what the process is to get to that. Next slide. So with that, I'm going to give a brief overview of each of our goal areas, the indicators within those goal areas, and just highlight any significant events. And so the indicators in our goal 1, safeguarding for climate change, goal are sea level rise planning, ocean warming, and ocean acidification. Ocean warming is a new indicator and includes average sea surface temperature trends from the early 1900s to today, which indicate a warming of 0.2 to 0.3 Fahrenheit increase per decade trend, and also reports on marine heat waves, which are episodic warming events and have shown a notable increase in both frequency and intensity, with a highlight of the marine heat wave that we saw in 2023. And then accomplishments here, you heard some of them from Jenn in the ED report. Very exciting to launch our SB1 Sea Level Rise Adaptation Planning Grant Program, to release the draft of the Sea Level Rise State of California Sea Level Rise Guidance, which was really the bulk of the work and finalized in 2023, and then continued progress on ocean acidification monitoring network integration. Next slide. And then our advancing equity, goal 2, includes indicators on public beach access and beach water quality. We had a lot of really interesting discussions about public beach access, and there's a lot of really interesting facts and details to dig into in the report on that. With the sort of overall trend that coastal public beach access has improved since 2014. And then accomplishments within goal 2 are around the tribal engagement strategy being adopted, and the launch of the tribal small grants program, and then implementation of the environmental justice small grants program. Next slide. Biodiversity, goal 3, indicators around kelp and harmful algal blooms. The HABs indicator highlighted 2 unfortunate widespread stranding events of California sea lions and dolphins that occurred in 2022 and 2023, resulting from blooms of domoic acid and from domoic acid producing pseudonychia. And the 2023 event in particular involved approximately 1,000 marine mammal stranding events. And then accomplishments within this goal around funding innovative MPA marine protected area research, development of kelp restoration and management plan, and associated investments, and implementation of the statewide microplastic strategy. Next slide. And then around goal 4, which is our blue economy goal, we don't have any indicators currently. They are all in development. I think, these goals in particular are really challenging, sort of layering on the human behavior and the human interactions on top of physical and biological trends is really a challenge to do correctly. And so we're very much working on this, and it is a priority. And then, but I can highlight some significant, unfortunate events around fisheries closures that were highlighted in the report, specifically the early closure and delayed opening of the Dungeness crab fishery. And then for only the second time in history, there was a full closure of California's commercial and recreational salmon fisheries due to a combination of historic drought, wildfire impacts to spawning habitat, and harmful algal blooms. And so these events continue to highlight the urgent need to improve climate-ready fisheries for California, and we will continue to work on indicators in this area. Next slide. So that wraps up sort of the overview of the 2023 report. Looking forward, and as promised in last year's report, we worked with the Ocean Science Trust to leverage the OPC Science Advisory Team to really conduct a deep dive on indicators, what process we should take to develop indicators, and actually recommend a preliminary suite of indicators to start with. So this is Exhibit B, and it's a report produced by the SAT. And so their key overarching recommendations were to adapt the NOAA Coral Reef Monitoring Programs framework for indicator development to get to that report card. And then to align with the West Coast Ocean Alliance approaches around looking at, stressors and threats and those categories. And then, like I said, there is actually a proposed suite of indicators that you can find in the report. I'm not going to dig into those here because it would take quite a while. They are very conceptual, so there's still just a lot of work to do to dig into those indicators and say, okay, well, what is the data that we would use to support this indicator? How, is that supported, statewide? How would we think about analyzing and scoring this? So it's a great overarching first step that the SAT took, but there's still just a lot of work to be done from that. And so their recommendation was, really to start in 2024, really digging into how you would pursue those proposed indicators. Next slide. And then as Liz already teed up, our next steps really are around partnering with the Ocean Science Trust, launching a task force for the report card for indicators, convening subject matter working groups and funding analysis as needed. And then we really see the 2024 annual report as an opportunity for feedback on that initial develop that initial step to really make towards the 2025 report card. Next slide. And thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. At this time, I just would like to invite any members of the public in person, if they have comment, to come up to the microphone. And Stacy, do we have any commenters online?
There are none at this time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So with that, I just want to invite discussion from any council members or questions. Please.
I had a question about the indicators task force. I'm just wondering how you guys are thinking about membership. Is that a subset of the SAT? Is that like combination of academics outside of the SAT, members of the public? Yeah.
Liz looks like she wants to jump in.
Welcome to a design process that is underway as we speak. I think we have much to discuss about how to appropriately encompass sort of diverse knowledge systems, diverse perspectives, and solicit advice in a way that is sort of respectful of people's engagements in the future. But we'll share more as we have it developed.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, just briefly, I want to celebrate the successes of the council. As a rotating member, selfishly, this report is very useful for me to see what you guys have been up to over the past year. And it's just fantastic work. The implementation of the statewide microplastic strategy, the draft sea level rise guidance. Of course, there was some disappointing news, but that really just uplifts the importance of this council in identifying those issues, and we can work together to do our best to solve those. So really appreciate you and the council. Thank you. Great work.
And yeah, I'll just add on to that and all of it's the presentation today, but all of the work that all the OPC staff have been doing throughout the years for all of that. So. And with no other comments, thank you so much. And and with that, I would like to welcome Martha and Christine up for item 5, which is both an informational and an action item for the consideration and approval to augment funds to advance modeling of ocean acidification drivers and impacts on the Central Coast.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Landau and members of the council. For well over a decade, OPC has prioritized meaningful action and investments to better understand the causes and impacts of ocean acidification and hypoxia, and to effectively adapt to changing ocean conditions that impact the health of our coast, ocean, and communities. Today, we are joined by Dr. Martha Sutula, Principal Scientist with the Southern California Coastal Water Research Project Authority, to provide a guest presentation and informational update regarding one of OPC's longest-standing projects to understand the impacts of OAH along California's coast. Following her informational item, I will present the proposed staff recommendation to augment OPC's ongoing work to advance ocean acidification modeling on the Central Coast. Dr. Sutula.
Well, good afternoon. It's my pleasure on behalf of our entire science team, and I've noted here more than 6 research institutions, 20 scientists that have been working on this for almost a decade now. And so today I'm going to be talking to you about the work that this team has done to advance ocean modeling in support of climate change and water quality management along our coastline. Next slide, please. So why are we talking about ocean models? Well, it's clear from the council report out on the staff level that you all have been investing in monitoring. And monitoring is great because it really helps you understand, a lot about past conditions. And it also can really help you understand how effective your management actions have been once you've monitored for long enough. But modeling is an important complement to that monitoring, and it has distinct advantages. And I think this is the reason why we're talking about today, which is that it really helps provide information about the past, the present, and future conditions. And it also can help predict the future and how that future could change based on your management actions that you're contemplating without having spent a dime. And so it's really useful for that to start to kind of game out what strategies may be useful that you may want to employ to address an environmental problem. Next slide, please. So climate change is one of those problems, and ocean models have really been servicing, the globe in terms of really helping us understand how to grapple with this issue. And today, what we're talking about are the facets of climate change that are causing ocean warming, acidification, where you have CO2 being absorbed by the oceans and that lowers pH, so, as well as hypoxia that's caused by that ocean warming and you're sort of deoxygenating the ocean. And so the combination of these 3 stressors are causing essentially a triple whammy along our coastline and really beginning to impact our marine resources that we so treasure. Next slide, please. So the question that the Ocean Protection Council really wanted to try to get to the bottom to is what are the potential local strategies that we could be using to build resilience to ocean acidification and hypoxia along our coastline. And one of those that was called out by an expert panel several years back was the idea that you could manage potentially local human sources of nutrient inputs into the coastline as a way of building that resilience, of buying us time. And the backstory of how this could help is that, along our coastline, we understand that human nutrients can fuel algal blooms, which when they die and senesce and fall in the water column, consume oxygen and lower pH and oxygen. But ultimately, to really understand whether or not that's an effective strategy along our coastline, we also have to understand that California's ocean is naturally enriched with nutrients that come from upwelling, and it's also naturally low in oxygen and pH in those deep waters, and that climate change is driving that pH and oxygen lower. So you need to have a way of disentangling these 3 pieces. And ultimately, only a model can really help you get to the bottom of that question by disentangling the relative importance of those 3 components and how they would change along our coastline. Next slide, please. So the approach that our science team has taken is essentially to build a coupled physical biogeochemical model. So the physical model is based on something called the Regional Ocean Modeling System. It's a physical model that basically predicts how the ocean water moves in response to the atmospheric conditions as well as the outer currents and circulation from the greater coastline. And that is coupled with a research grade water quality model. We call it the biogeochemical elemental cycling model. It's a mouthful. But basically what this model does is it pulls in the inputs from land and those human sources, as well as the oceanic sources of nutrients, predicts how that results in the production of plankton, and then how that could ultimately influence pH and oxygen loss along our coastline. So this is a state-of-the-art model, and this is great, but the problem is it only predicts seawater chemistry, and you folks are really interested in how that affects biological resources. So next, just hit it, please. Thank you, right there. So part of the work that we've been doing is science to synthesize and get consensus on the biological thresholds and indices that would help us translate those predictions of seawater chemistry all the way to how that could be affecting marine life. Next slide. So that's the approach that we've been taking. And then what I wanted to sort of give you an example is just to help you understand, what this model does. And so it's a three-dimensional model. So it's simulating ocean space with the fourth dimension of time. And then what it essentially does, and I'm showing you the model set up for our Southern California coastline. So it has about 66 million grid cells. And then within each grid cell, it's computing the chemistry of what's going on, the sources and sinks of transformation of nutrients and oxygen and carbon every 15 seconds. And then the physics is moving that chemistry around in a way that allows us then, and this is a state-of-the-art tool that really helps us start to have a place-based conversation and understanding if you put nutrients into a certain location along the coastline, what happens to it and what effects. Next slide. So we use this model to answer three management questions, focusing first on our southern coast, the Southern California Bight. The three questions were, what is the effect of human sources of nutrients on algal blooms, oxygen, and pH? And so once you have predictions of that seawater chemistry, then the second question is, well, what are the biological effects of those changes? And then the third question is, well, if we understand the scope or the magnitude of those effects, then what are the potential scenarios or management options that we have for how we may want to change or modify those effects? And so the question that was focused on is, how does simulating nitrogen reduction or nutrient reductions in ocean outfalls change those effects? Next slide. So what I'm going to tell you about is just essentially give you a very high level summary of those three questions. And so on this first question, I think it's really helpful to understand, how would we use the model to answer that question? So what we essentially do is we have two separate model scenarios, one that is only the ocean and its prediction of chemistry, et cetera. And then there's another scenario, a separate simulation that has the ocean plus the land-based inputs. And what you essentially do then is you take these two scenarios and you subtract them, and what's left over is essentially the change to the ocean with respect to how, the land-based inputs. And so in the next slide, you'll be seeing then, essentially, thank you very much, what this net change is. And so the answer, the kind of high level answer to this first question is that the model is predicting that with these two very extreme scenarios, ocean only, land, and then ocean plus land, that those inputs are substantially altering seawater chemistry. And the slide you're showing here is essentially the positive change in algal biomass, so increased production of algae in the water, shown in the colors on the color scale of red. As you get darker, it's a higher amount. And it shows sort of bite wide along the entire coastline from the southern end of Mexico all the way to Point Conception. There's about a 40% increase in algal production, but a doubling at the coast. So you see the more intense red colors at the coast. And that this is triggering a decline of pH and oxygen for about a 4 to 6 month period starting in the summer, even though it doesn't meaningfully affect pH and oxygen during other parts of the year. So this is a seasonal phenomenon that we're predicting as a result of those land-based inputs. Next slide, please. okay, well, so I said, we've got chemistry. How do we care about the fact that we are changing, a certain amount of oxygen in the water? And so if our model's predicting chemistry, what we really want to do is start to translate how those changes are likely to affect biology. And the way that we do this is by understanding that the ocean represents a habitat for these critters defined by oxygen and pH levels that they can tolerate. And when you begin to change those levels, you begin to compress or squeeze their habitat. So we're defining a habitat squeeze. And in order to predict that, then we need pH and oxygen thresholds that predict that squeeze. And what you'll note is that some of the same thresholds that Justine was referring to in her talk are essentially the ones that we're using as well, that we've been working on scientific consensus to get there in order to basically be able to predict what's the effect of that changing levels of oxygen and pH in the water column. Next slide, please. And so the sort of high level answer to question 2 is that the models predicting that the land-based inputs are appearing to compress habitat. And let me just explain really quickly the graphics. There's 2 smaller ones with land-based inputs and without. And what we're showing now is that when you apply an ocean acidification threshold, you can quantify how much habitat the critters have. And then when you do the change assessment, the larger graphic on the right-hand side is essentially showing the % change in the thickness of that habitat. In this example, for pteropods, which is one of our most sensitive marine life that are essentially sensitive to ocean acidification. Now, these are not sublethal, these are not lethal thresholds, those are never triggered, and nor do we trigger sublethal thresholds for 9 months a year. But what we're seeing is that there is roughly for about a 3-month period, a habitat squeeze over a fairly large area of the bite. It's about a quarter in areas that we can see up to about 30% vertical compression in the habitat. And we're finding very similar things for both pH and oxygen. Next slide. So managers said, okay, well, this is something that we would like to investigate more. Can we start to use the model to run scenarios? And I think what I want to impress upon you is not that we've come up with a management scenario that you're going to walk away with and implement today, but that you're starting to see this pivoting of the use of model towards using it as a decision support tool. And that's really important because that is its potential. And so they asked us to investigate the effects of both nitrogen reduction in outfall, the wastewater discharge to ocean outfalls, as well as potable water recycling, in which when you do that, in some circumstances, you're essentially reducing the outfall volume. And because we don't have a ton of time today, I'm just going to focus on the effects of nitrogen reduction alone. And what we want to communicate is that when we ran scenarios ranging from 0% nitrogen, so we didn't alter anything, to 50 to 85% reduction of present day levels, what we found is that essentially the models predicting the recovery or reversal of changes in seawater chemistry and that compressed habitat that are roughly proportional with the amount of effort that you're putting in to reduce the nitrogen. So the bottom line at minus 100% represents ocean only. You start to approach that once you get up to 85% reduction, for example. Next slide. So I think what we're communicating, that last set of scenarios was really just a start to the effort that we're engaging in and using this model as a decision support tool, and we have a lot more to do. So, we very much feel like this is still a work in progress. There's, I think, 3 major things that we're working on that I'd like to communicate. First, this is a model, and models have uncertainty. And so we really are engaged in trying to increase stakeholder confidence in that model by quantifying what that uncertainty is. In the Southern California Bight, where we've done all this work, we've done 1 round of model validation where we're comparing observations with model predictions. We've published that once, and we have another round of that in progress. We've also engaged with a stakeholder-led independent expert review panel who is reviewing the model and commenting on how to improve it or how to quantify that model uncertainty. We're also working on providing context for the results that we've already provided by helping people understand, well, if you quantify that amount of change due to land-based inputs, how much is that compared with what climate change has already done in terms of a habitat squeeze, and then what's coming in 50 years. And so if you're going to start dialing a very expensive knob to manage nutrients, how much time could that buy you? And so that, in addition to really starting to discuss more realistic scenarios, is then I think you'll begin to see how the model really starts to show its potential for decision support. And then finally, alongside all of the work that we've been doing in the Southern California Bight, we've been pursuing a parallel set of questions in the San Francisco and Monterey coast, which is another region that has a fair amount of nutrient outwelling onto the coastline. Next slide, please. And this is my last. And so what I want to report out that there, essentially, as we start from scratch, to do the same thing that we did in the Southern California Bight, we've made substantial progress on model development for this region. And principally, three major sort of accomplishments. We set up the model and we compiled all the land-based inputs, including some pretty complicated ones like the exchanges across the San Francisco Bay Golden Gate Bridge, essentially all the coastal rivers and the coastal municipal wastewater outfalls. We've done a preliminary model validation. The model is showing substantial promise, as well as a preliminary effects assessment, just like the one that I showed you in the previous slides. But then what we've done is essentially trying to understand how much of the effects that we are seeing can be attributed to the San Francisco Bay exchanges versus the coastal outfalls or the coastal rivers. And so we've really made a substantial progress, and you'll hear a little bit more from Christine then, what are the plans that we're contemplating to go from here. With that, I'll stop, and we may be out of time, but let's see. Thank you.
Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? All right. So hi again, I will be presenting on item 5, consideration and approval to augment funds to advance modeling of ocean acidification drivers and impacts on the Central Coast. Next slide. So under OPC Strategic Plan Goal 1 on climate change, this project addresses Objective 1.2 to minimize causes and impacts of ocean acidification and hypoxia, which I will be referring to as OAH from this point forward. Specifically, it directly supports 2 targets, including establishing water quality objectives based on the latest scientific research and implementation of California's OA Action Plan. And as we've heard about through various presentations today, we know that OAH are among a web of threats facing California's coast and ocean, and this project really helps to support climate resilience and thus support healthy ocean ecosystems for all Californians. Next slide, please. So as Dr. Sotula explained and showed in the map, there are many consequences of OAH for ocean ecosystems. And given all of these consequences, OPC has prioritized efforts to understand and address the impacts of OAH in California and has invested substantial resources in the development of the ROMSPEC model that you just heard about. And as Martha just explained, this includes supporting research focused on the San Francisco and Monterey coasts, as shown in the map here. And like the research in the Southern California Bight, modeling has really focused on understanding the effects of anthropogenic nutrient inputs on OAH and the resulting biological impacts, as well as really parsing out the impacts of different pathways and sources. And importantly, addressing nutrient pollution is a high priority in this region because we know there's significant inputs from the urban watersheds in the San Francisco Bay, as well as agricultural dominated watersheds in the Monterey area. Next slide. And modeling so far has provided a really important starting point for addressing OAH research in this region. And based on the preliminary results, an augmentation is needed to support additional research that furthers our understanding of the system dynamics in greater detail to the level of detail that we know from the Southern California Bight from the research done so far. And specifically, This proposed augmentation will allow for the use of new information, including new USGS hydrological models for riverine inputs in the region, so in the Monterey area. It will provide more context to quantify and attribute different nutrient sources and pathways, and to understand the relative effects of all of these inputs on OAH and the resulting biological effects in the region, which is also notable. It's also of note that it's home to different national or marine sanctuaries in this area. And rigorous modeled results and improved understanding of nutrient loading from this proposed project have the potential to support decision-making related to nutrient management and mitigating and reducing OAH impacts. And while the State Water Board wasn't able to be here today, they've submitted a letter of support and has their information and materials that reference how this information might be used. Next slide. OPC has continued to invest in this model as well as other OAH research and monitoring priorities. This is consistent with the recommendations of the California OAH Task Force and the OA Action Plan. Modeling is simply one tool in a suite of OPC-supported work. OPC has supported OA data collection, a coordinated monitoring network, and resources to provide this OAH information to inform decision-making and adaptation and mitigation efforts. Altogether, with the modeling work, these investments are critical to help the state understand and meaningfully address the impact of OAH on our coast and ocean. Next slide. To conclude, staff recommends the council approve the disbursement of up to $561.72 to the Southern California Coastal Water Research Project Authority. This modeling will provide new information and address research gaps to carefully assess the effects of anthropogenic nutrients on ocean acidification and hypoxia and the biological impacts of these conditions on the San Francisco and Monterey coasts. And crucially, it will inform potential management strategies to mitigate OAH impacts in the region. Thank you. Next slide.
Thank you so much. At this time, I want to open it up for public comment on item 5.
Good morning. Good morning, Richard Sadowski, Homefront EJ Morro Bay. We support the funding for this modeling, but I want to add a little something. My wife and another colleague of mine several years ago, we're from Morro Bay, so it's a lot smaller area. But one of the things that might be something that you might want to lace in there is we've done extensive report writing on the condition of the sewer collection systems in Morro Bay. And there's something like infiltration and exfiltration going into waterways that have potentially can get into like an estuary or local areas in addition to having the outfall. So I think that in our area, it could be a significant amount of nutrients going into the waterways in addition to the outfall. And the other thing that regarding ocean acidification, I want to give a shout out to a sponsor of ours who helped fund our project, the Morro Bay Estuary Air Monitoring Project, and is where we can get some low cost air monitors. And working with the Cal Poly Carbon Lab, working with them where they're testing for ocean acidification, we're giving them atmospheric carbon dioxide data in real time. And that might be another variable to add into studying OA, especially in blue carbon areas like our estuary. Thank you for your support.
Thank you very much.
Hi, good afternoon. Jared Vosco on behalf of CASA, the California Association of Sanitation Agencies. CASA represents over 130 wastewater agencies that provide the collection of wastewater, treatment, resource recovery, and recycling of the water. It's been a few meetings since I've been here, so I recognize, or I don't recognize, new faces here, but I did want to just, connect with you on this item today, as well as, give you an update on our microplastics study that has been ongoing since 2020. We've been working with Dr. Satula's colleague, Dr. Wong at SCORP, on this project, and I think we have a report coming out. We're expected in the next month or two, and we're very excited about that. And then there'll be a supplemental report that is going to follow along. Our members supported that, and it will look on method development for microplastic collection at wastewater agencies. And we had 8 agencies across the state participate in the study. So that's one really great project we're excited about. On this one before you today, in this augmentation of the funding for ocean acidification, we want to complement the work that has been performed to date by SWRP with the OPC's funding. We're also involved on another project with you all pertaining to this, and that's the independent review panel that Dr. Satula mentioned. In the August 2023 Executive Director Report for the Ocean Protection Council, it mentioned the formation of this review panel, but it includes a project steering committee of representatives from the Ocean Protection Council, the State Water Board, Region 9 Water Board Executive Officer, California Coastkeeper, 3 wastewater representatives, as well as representatives from the scientific community. And they've been ushering this review of the model that is going to be utilized in task 2 of the funding proposal before you. And so I see I'm running short on time, but I'm hoping I can maybe have just an extra moment or two to just, highlight this effort that's ongoing and to share that we expect a report to be coming out in the next 2 to 3 months. And that report is going to address a few charge questions that the panel were kind of tasked with, and I thought maybe it'd be good to share those with you as a refresher. The first one was whether the model formulation, domain, setup, enforcing, and predictions were appropriate for the water quality management applications that are being considered. The second charge question was what is the uncertainty in the predictions that the model's producing that are relevant for water quality applications? And then the third was what investments would most enhance model performance and improve model certainty. And so as we're discussing this augmentation today in this work that's going to be in task 2 for the Central Coast region, we do think it's important that after the report comes out, I think the project steering committee is planning to work with the modeling team to identify how to incorporate recommendations into the model so that when this work is executed, hopefully it could be within the updated version of the model. And in terms to, reference why I think that's important, during the independent review panel, the modeling team at SCORP shared that the Romsbeck models are community research models. And if managers wanted to take that community research model and require extra bells and whistles so it's ready for regulatory use, that's not part of the typical research activities funded by the National Science Foundation. So it would require some extra tending to, and then it could be an operational model. But if it's going to be management adopted, it's going to need extra stuff that won't be supported by typical research grants. And so as we're thinking about how to, update, this model for that, I think we want to have a conversation about prioritizing that and helping make investments in the model so that the results from it have widespread community acceptance.
Thank you very much.
So with that, I appreciate your time and thank you.
Thank you. Any other in-person comments specifically on item 5? And Stacy, do we have any commenters online?
We do. We have Sean Bothwell. Sean, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Sean Bothwell. I'm the Executive Director for the California Coastkeeper Alliance. I'll make this quick, but we just wanted to thank and applaud the OPC for its leadership and funding for ocean acidification and hypoxia research to date. We strongly support the funding here today for modeling along the Central Coast. From the OPC's scientific investments, the state has learned that the land-based nutrients discharged to the ocean from large coastal wastewater facilities are linked to ocean acidification and the loss of oxygen, creating ocean acidification and hypoxia hotspots. And as you heard from Martha today, during late summer months, ocean acidification and hypoxia hotspots form and cause marine habitat compression on average of about 20%, but up to 60% for the water column and 25%, approximately about 1,000 square miles of the Southern California bight. We find this, research incredibly alarming So we're extremely supportive of the OPC's proposal to fund the advanced modeling on the Central Coast. But the state overall needs to do more. California needs to act immediately and decisively to protect our ocean from the alarming occurrence of ocean acidification and hypoxia off the California coast. The State Water Board needs to begin prioritizing the development of an ocean acidification policy that sets a technology-based water quality standard and requires denitrification as part of the compliance implementation schedule to meet that standard. The governor's office and the California legislature need to include budget funding so that the State Water Board has the resources it needs to adopt such a policy by the state's Ocean Strategic Plan goal of 2025. The legislature also needs to include future bond requirements for denitrification planning within water recycling grants and loans. This will push for a two-pronged approach to address the impacts of ocean acidification and hypoxia by both recycling our ocean wastewater while also removing nutrients from the brine discharge. And finally, we encourage the Ocean Protection Council to think beyond just research funding and to further support the State Water Board's efforts to adopt an ocean acidification policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Stacy, anyone else?
There are no other hands raised.
Thank you. And with that, I'd like to open it up to discussion from the council. Of course.
So I thought this was great. And coming into this, you know, like I had questions. This is the second meeting in a row actually where we've done an augmentation to a project. And so I'm coming in thinking like, is this necessary? Does this move the needle forward? And I think the point that I was making around like efficiency of projects and amendments, that this is one that kind of meets those metrics. And it's for a few reasons. We're getting increased spatial resolution of the model, which I think is really important. We're adding biological considerations, which is so much of really why we're tracking a lot of these trends in the work. And then I think it's pointing to actionable science. Before you switch slides, there was a moment where I was like, but can we do scenario modeling? And you pointed to scenario modeling and I was like, that. And then I think the point around evaluating model uncertainty is a really important one because there is level of skepticism from the public, from different people in the academic community about how much we can trust models. And so I think whether it's like making time for those conversations with stakeholders who have findings and finding ways to integrate that, but also being able to understand if decision makers are going to use this tool, like what is the level of uncertainty? How much can we trust this is just really important. So helpful updates from staff and from you, Dr. Satula.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions from council members? Councilmember Rocha?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your presentation and all of your work. It's pretty fascinating to see and to try to take on these very complex questions, right? And try to provide some answers. I just kind of had a question about something one of the speakers said about how do we use this model sort of in a regulatory context moving forward for decision makers, and if there has been thought about how the State Water Board and others might use this information and make sure that the model is to a level to where that can happen. So just more of a question on one of the public comment.
Oh, there we go. So just to answer the question about how this might be used in management, we've been in discussions with the state and regional water boards on this item. And as you know, they're supportive and they have submitted a letter. And they've shared with us that it could inform development of a nutrient management standard, potential assessments to support OA Federal Clean Water Act Section 303 delisting determinations, future targeted monitoring, and potential total maximum daily load development to reduce the impacts of OAH. And to the question about the model to be at a level where it can really inform management, as we have said, and I can, Dr. Satula can answer that as well, but just really expanding the level of information that we have, especially from these new models, to really carefully understand where these inputs are coming from and the different hydrological dynamics that are going into the coast is really important and really will help make this as usable as possible. Do you want to add anything?
Thank you. Yeah, just a really quick comment that as you sort of transition from research models to kind of operational regulatory models, it means it goes from a university, like UCLA, where all these models are housed and all that expertise resides, to putting it out into the community that anyone can pick it up with a manual and do it. And so, I think that the comment about operational models really speaks more to the readiness of that pick it up and anyone can do it sort of mode, rather than the model itself. But clearly, ultimately, there's still a lot of work that goes into making sure that people feel comfortable with this model and what it's capable, understanding it and its warts and all, right? So I think that there's several different pieces to how do you really ultimately put it out into the regulatory world, and those conversations are still ongoing. Hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so much. I appreciate that.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, if I could ask for a motion.
I'm happy to make the motion. You have to read it on this council, correct?
And you would be, hang on, I've got the
The
link.
motion to approve the disbursement of up to $561,072 to the Southern California Coastal Water Research Project to advance an integrated Earth system model to assess the effects of anthropogenic nutrients on ocean acidification and hypoxia and the biological impacts of these conditions on the San Francisco and Monterey coast.
Perfect. Thank you for that motion. Anyone a second?
I'll second.
Perfect, thank you. And with that, Stacy, could you call for a vote or roll call?
Thank you. Katy Landau,
Aye.
Christina Kunkel,
Aye.
Alexis Jackson,
Yes.
Megan Rocha.
Yes.
Thank you. The council has voted unanimously. The motion passes.
Perfect, thank you so much. Moving on to item 6, which is another action item for the consideration and approval to disperse funds for an intertidal biodiversity DNA barcode library. I'd like to invite Pike up.
Awesome. Great. Good afternoon, members of the council. My name is Pike Spector, and I'm excited to present the staff recommendation for the disbursement of funds to create an intertidal biodiversity DNA barcode library. Next slide, please. Objective 3.1 of the Ocean Protection Council's strategic plan identifies the need to protect and restore coastal and marine ecosystems. Nested under target 3.1.3, this action specifically calls for the development of a robust approach for predicting multi-scale climate-driven changes, including species range shifts in rocky intertidal and beach ecosystems. Next slide, please. California has approximately 1,100 miles of coastline defined by rocky shores, sandy beaches, and estuaries and salt marshes. The rocky intertidal alone is home to a staggering diversity of organisms, including endemic algae and animals. While the beach or tide pools are likely the marine ecosystems many Californians first interact with, they are still poorly understood. Next slide, please. The intertidal zone itself is a dynamic environment defined by change, mainly the changing of the tides. And these ecosystems are under threat from human-induced stressors. Anthropogenic climate change has already begun to affect our coast and ocean, but an underlying question that is yet to be answered is, what do these impacts mean for biodiversity? Next slide, please. One attempt to answer this pivotal question was presented to the California State Legislature in 2022 and 2023. As part of the Budget Act of 2023, a $9.5 million general fund appropriation directed the Ocean Protection Council to support the development of the intertidal biodiversity DNA barcode library. This appropriation was informed by recommendations from an expert panel of leading scientists as part of the Intertidal Biodiversity Working Group. Next slide, please. First, let's clarify what we mean when we say intertidal biodiversity DNA barcode library. This library will be an online, publicly accessible database of DNA barcodes for key taxa across the state's intertidal zones. In this context, a barcode is simply a short, standardized segment of DNA that is unique at the species level. The online library will serve as a reference to compare barcode segments against, which allows for highly accurate species identification. Next slide, please. The library will be built through a partnership-based approach, which will utilize museum-curated collections of preserved samples, as well as organisms sampled from the field. We have identified Coastal Quest, a Bay Area-based nonprofit, as the grantee who will administer competitive grant solicitations and discretionary spending to execute the directive of the legislature. Next slide, please. This ambitious project will deliver the online, publicly accessible, intertidal biodiversity DNA barcode library, as well as durable collections of field-collected specimens and their associated metadata, and exciting analyses and data products to inform the restoration and management of our coast's iconic intertidal habitats. For example, as climate change continues to shift community baselines, analytical tools such as species distribution models will serve as early warning systems for changes to coastal biodiversity and potential encroachment from invasive species. Next slide, please. OPC staff recommend dispersing $9,025,000 to Coastal Quest for this impactful project to deliver the intertidal biodiversity DNA barcode library as directed by the California legislature in the Budget Act of 2023. Please note that there is a 5% allocation of the original appropriation for OPC administration. Pending council concurrence, work will begin in the second quarter of this year and wrap up in the first quarter of 2027. Next slide, please. Thank you for your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And with that, I'd like to open it up for public comment from in-person attendees on item 6.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for the opportunity to share my comments. My name is Rebecca Johnson, and I'm the co-director of the Center for Biodiversity and Community Science at the California Academy of Sciences, and I'm a marine invertebrate zoologist. I spent the first half of my career working in museum collections, sequencing DNA to understand the relationships and answer key evolutionary questions. Now in my work, I focus on gathering biodiversity data with people throughout the state and mobilizing those data to help inform conservation, science, and policy. This project really brings together these two parts of my expertise, and I support the funding for this project. These funds for building a DNA barcode library for intertidal biodiversity will allow us to build a comprehensive understanding of the diversity of species along our coast in the nearshore intertidal, one of the most diverse marine ecosystems in the world. And it's only by constructing a genetic library of this diversity that we'll be able to interpret and fully understand the results of eDNA monitoring. These funds will allow us to secure and put to good work close to 200 years of accumulated knowledge about intertidal biodiversity held in the state's natural history museums. They will also fuel new expeditions to gain a more full understanding of current biodiversity along our coast and how that's changing. The conceptualization of this project is a result of a partnership between natural history museums like the California Academy of Sciences and the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County, as well as faculty and museum curators across the University of California and California State University systems, as well as the California Institute for Biodiversity and other academic and environmental monitoring experts. It really is an amazing brain trust, and it's been an honor to work with this team. The results of this project, knowing what species are where and how their ranges are changing, informed by a new DNA library, will form part of the critical foundation for the state's future work to enhance coastal and marine biodiversity. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Right, any other public commenters up to the podium?
Hi, good afternoon, Chair and Council members. Dan Gluesenkamp with the California Institute for Biodiversity. Just want to reiterate that our coast is facing myriad insults and threats, and the intertidal is jeopardized. It's a time of crisis, but also a big time of opportunity to right the wrongs of the past and help save the intertidal for the future. We're fortunate that we've got legislative champions who are fighting for the coast, and within the administration, folks like Secretary Crowfoot, Director Eckerle, And in OPC, Mike Gusgrove, and thank you very much, Pike. Dedicated people who are investing relatively modest amounts compared to the savings and the benefits that we're going to get in the future. CIB strongly supports this project, and we hope that the council will concur with the staff recommendation and move it forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other in-person commenters? And if not, I will turn it over to Stacy. Do we have anyone online?
We do. We have Dean Pencheth. Dean, you have the floor.
Well, Chair Landau and council members and members of the legislature and agencies and staff of the council, thank you very much for taking this comment. My name is Dean Pencheth. I'm a marine biodiversity research scientist at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County. I think we're all becoming more and more familiar with the remarkable promise that environmental DNA has to contribute to discovering and monitoring biodiversity. Sequencing the DNA that's shed from all the organisms in the wild, it's like a whole new language that we can read to measure biodiversity and measure change in biodiversity. It complements manual surveys of indicators with some rapid, cheap, and high-resolution data. But before we can read environmental DNA, as with any new language, we need the dictionary that links the words to meaning. And in this case, the dictionary is one that lets us use a genetic sequence to look up a species. Statewide, many of us have been cobbling that dictionary together almost as a hobby side project, creating reference entries, that's the reference sequences for species, at the rate of hundreds per year. But there are thousands of species of algae, invertebrate animals, and other organisms on our coast, as Pike Spector pointed out, each of which needs an entry in the genetic dictionary. It is this project, the Intertidal Biodiversity DNA Barcode Library, that is the necessary next step to build out the genetic reference dictionary for our coast. It will do this with an intensive and coherent statewide program. It's a really effective investment that's essential to make environmental DNA become the incredible tool it will be for coastal management for decades to come. I thank you for your support of this project, and particularly under such a challenging budget environment. And I personally pledge to you that we will work on getting a shorter name for this project. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Any other virtual comments?
We just had Tegan Hoffman join us. Tegan, you have the floor.
Oh, okay. Good afternoon. My name is Tegan Hoffman, and I'm the Executive Director of Coastal Quest. Thank you, OPC Chair and Council members and OPC staff, for your leadership and support to move this important project forward. It's critical for the state to inventory marine intertidal biodiversity and deliver accessible data and maps that are urgently needed to plan conservation actions and coastal resilience investments. Coastal Quest is committed to leverage this investment with philanthropic support, and we've already secured a 2-year environmental leadership program, Ray Fellow, to help maximize the equity and environmental justice benefits and workforce development aspects of the project. We strongly support this project, and if you approve, we look forward to our collaboration moving forward with OPC staff and partners. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commenters, Stacy?
There are no further hands.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And with that, I'd like to open it up to the council members for discussion or questions. Nope. And online? And hearing none? Oh, sorry, please.
Comment and a question about, I guess, flexibility of this program. So as a trained geneticist, I'm like, yay, investments in DNA. I can't deny that. But then also recognizing $9 million is a lot of money. I guess I'm trying to understand, like, in addition to understanding, and barcoding these species, where is there room in like the project scope for like additional analyses? So like, if we're thinking about genomic investments, like, is there an ability for projects to submit that give evidence of like analyzing for local adaptation, looking for traits that are under selection so that we can kind of actionize some of this and get a sense of like, in addition to knowing what species are where, also are there like traits across these species and changes that we're seeing that we should be aware of as another kind of early warning?
Thanks for your comment and for your question. There is definitely flexibility for those kinds of analyses. Those are some of the questions that we want to highlight, especially in the context of 30 by 30, identifying hotspots for biodiversity and genetic adaptation and genetic diversity, absolutely within the scope of this. One of the many exciting data tools, I think, associated with this project.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the council? And if there's not, could I ask for a motion on this item?
I'll make a motion to authorize the disbursement of up to $9,025,000 to Coastal Quest to support the development of an intertidal biodiversity DNA barcode library for California.
And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Stacy, could you please take roll call?
Katy Landau,
Aye.
Christina Kunkel,
Aye.
Alexis Jackson,
Yes.
Megan Rocha.
Yes.
Thank you. The council has voted unanimously. The motion passes.
Thank you so much. Moving on to item 7, this is another action item for the consideration and approval to disperse funds to reduce the risk of whale and sea turtle entanglement in fishing gear. And Katie, you're already at the podium. And just as a reminder for anyone who joined us late, just want to flag that there was an addendum that went out for item or project D that I know we will hear about more in a second. So please.
And if I might, through the chair, I failed to acknowledge that this is really close to the last day that we have with Katy. She's concluding her Sea Grant Fellowship, and I just want to thank you, Katy, for all of your incredible work, particularly over the last couple of months where we've really leaned on you significantly as an important member of our team. Your willingness to jump in, your determination, your scientific chops, your thoughtfulness and innovation. We are truly grateful, and we are going to miss you.
Thank you so much, Jen. Definitely likewise. And now you've made me a little emotional before I do this speech. So, anyway, good afternoon. Good afternoon, council members. My name is Katy Sierri. I am the outgoing Sea Grant Fellow in OPC's Biodiversity Program. And today I'm here to present consideration and approval to disperse funds to reduce the risk of whale and sea turtle entanglement in fishing gear. Slide, please. So entanglement in fishing gear poses a severe risk to whales and turtles. Entanglement in vertical lines connecting buoys to seafloor fishing traps can lead to severe injury and even death. Notably this year, an endangered leatherback sea turtle died after becoming entangled in abandoned fishing gear off the Farallon Islands. In recent years, reports of large whale and sea turtle entanglement off the California coast have increased dramatically. And a variety of factors may be contributing to this increase in entanglement reports, but climate-related changes in species distributions are some of the most concerning. Delayed openings and early closures of the Dungeness crab fishery have reduced entanglements, but have also led to economic hardships for the fleet. We must develop nimble and proactive strategies to protect these vital marine species and support fishing communities in the face of rapidly changing ocean conditions. Slide, please. In response to this increased threat to whales and sea turtles, the state appropriated $7.5 million in 2018 to address entanglement risk. In 2019, OPC released a strategy for protecting whales and sea turtles, which outlines a comprehensive approach to reduce the risk of entanglement in California fishing gear through advancing collaborative partnerships, best available science, and gear innovation, as well as response and outreach. Since the release of this strategy, OPC investments in whale and sea turtle monitoring, a fishing working group, gear innovation, and entanglement response have resulted in a dynamic, data-driven, collaborative approach to fisheries management, which has helped to reduce entanglement risk. However, we still have a long way to go to protect these vital species. Slide, please. So today I will present 4 targeted investments to spend the remainder of the entanglement appropriation. These projects, administered by the Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission, will build infrastructure for the adoption of innovative fishing gear, improve adaptive fisheries management, bolster entanglement response, and provide fishermen the opportunity to test innovative fishing gear. I will now review each award in detail. Slide, please. So this proposed investment of $200,000 in a ropeless fishing management portal will build the infrastructure needed to support the use and enforcement of innovative ropeless gear. The centralized hub will allow fishermen and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to track ropeless gear on the seafloor. The portal will improve fishermen's ability to make decisions on where to fish and support state enforcement efforts and adaptive fisheries management. Slide, please. So this proposed $1 million investment in manufactured line will build infrastructure for the adaptive management of the Dungeness crab fishery. In the strategy to protect whales and turtles, OPC prioritized collaboration with the California Dungeness Crab Fishing Gear Working Group. This working group recommended establishing standardized gear marking for all California fixed gear fisheries. It is not always easy to determine the fishery's source of all entanglements, and any unidentified entanglement source is attributed to the Dungeness crab fishery. Current regulations require marked buoys, but it is very difficult for managers to identify these buoys and determine the source of entangling gear from a distance. New regulations will require all Dungeness crab fisheries across the West Coast to mark line according to state and fishery, thereby enabling managers to identify the source of entanglements and therefore take specific actions to reduce future entanglement risk. Moreover, by subsidizing the purchase of line, OPC will reduce the economic burden on the Dungeness crab fleet as they work to adhere to these new regulations. Slide, please. So this proposed investment of up to $200,000 will build upon OPC's previous investment in on-water entanglement response. OPC investment will allow the foundation to further build their large whale entanglement response volunteer base. In partnership with the National Marine Fisheries Service and the National Large Whale Entanglement Response Network, the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation will host 2 annual trainings to refresh the skills of existing entanglement responders and also train new responders. Moreover, the foundation will establish a program to allow authorized responders to apply for reimbursement for vessel expenses incurred during entanglement response. These reimbursements are critical to support volunteers who donate their own time and vessels to respond to entanglements. Slide, please. So this proposed investment of up to $450,000 will support the expansion of the foundation's gear library for ropeless fishing gear. Up to $250,000 of this subaward will support the sanctuary's purchase of subsea sonics and Guardian ropeless gear for the gear library. Many members of the Dungeness crab fleet have expressed interest in using this gear through Subsea Sonics experimental fishing permit. Subsea Sonics is currently working to supply fishermen with gear to use under their experimental fishing permit, an amendment for which was recently approved by the California Fish and Game Commission earlier this month during the potential spring 2024 Dungeness crab fishery closure. Once OPC funds are available, Subsea Sonics and Guardian ropeless gear will be purchased and added to the foundation's gear library for further use and testing. The foundation will use all gear purchased for outreach, demonstration, and training. Fishermen will have the opportunity to test a variety of ropeless gear types without the financial burden of purchasing the gear themselves. This will allow for further testing and comparison of ropeless gear technologies and provide fishermen the opportunity to make informed choices about future gear investments. Slide, please. So in conclusion, I recommend that the council approve these amounts to fund 4 projects to help reduce the risk of whale and sea turtle entanglement in fishing gear. Taken together, these 4 investments will help to mitigate entanglement risk by building infrastructure for the use and enforcement of ropeless gear, improving adaptive fisheries management, supporting entanglement response, and providing fishermen the opportunity to test innovative gear. Slide, please. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present today, and thank you for the last year working with OPC staff. It's been a real blast, and thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Katie. And with that, I would like to open it up to public comment in person.
Good afternoon, Chair Landau, members of the council. My name is Jeff Shester, and I'm representing the conservation group Oceana. I'm a member of the California Dungeness Crab Fishing Gear Working Group, and I've been there since its beginning in 2015, and I've served over the last few years as the co-chair on the working group of the Gear Innovations Project team. I wanted to speak in enthusiastic support of the whale and sea turtle entanglement funding package before you today. I wanted to start by recognizing the California crab fishermen who, despite many challenges, are now stepping up to innovate and find solutions with courage and bravery. I've had the pleasure of working with many of them on the water as Oceana began funding the development of ropeless gear for the Dungeness crab fishery in 2018 in partnership with the working group and the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Thank you to the gear manufacturers like Subsea Sonics and Guardian Ropeless, researchers like Kim Sawicki, and efforts by the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation. We're now at an exciting and critical point where 20 fishermen are ready for the first time ever to do a large commercial scale test of the gear this spring. This is a sea change that would enable CDFW to authorize ropeless gear as soon as the next year for the entire fleet, so they can get the opportunity to fish in the spring once again. The OPC staff recommendation really hit a home run here. Not only did you bring together new collaborations to support this timely opportunity, but have also put together a well-rounded package, including the state's ropeless gear library, the ropeless enforcement portal, the whale disentanglement team funding, and unique line marking for the crab fishery. The OPC should be proud of the projects funded by the $7.5 million whale entanglement funds over the last 5 years. Thank you, Director Jenn Eckerle, Mike Eckerle, Katy for going above and beyond to make this package work. And thank you to the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation and the Department Whale Safe Fisheries team and Law Enforcement Division for stepping up to support this effort. So on behalf of the over 100,000 members that Oceana has in California, as well as many fishermen and conservation groups that couldn't be here today, we wanted to thank you for bringing this together, bringing everyone together and supporting a long-term sustainable and profitable whale and turtle safe fishery off California. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. Jennifer Fearing, also on behalf of Oceana, I'm doubling up because I just wanted to offer a personal and professional word of gratitude for the hustle and the thoughtfulness and coming together and finding this last chunk of funds to really make a meaningful difference. I also just will add, it's meaningful to me as an advocate to have been involved so many years ago, 2018, to advocate for these funds in the first place. I want to give a shout out to Richard Bloom, who's now a judge in Superior Court in Los Angeles, for being such a champion for marine mammals and whale disentanglement. It's really a partnership at the end of the day between NGOs, fishermen, the legislature, the administration to get these kinds of important things done. And it's meaningful to kind of see the beginning through to the end. So thanks to the whole OPC team for stewarding these funds so well over this time period. And I hope we can go to bat for more. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other in-person commenters? And seeing none. Stacy, do we have anyone online?
We have quite a few. Katiana Johnson, Michaela Miller, Lisa Damroche, Craig Schumann, Kim Sawicki, Scott Webb, Peggy Stopp, Ben Grundy, and Michael Beck, and just added Brand Little. Katiana, you have the floor.
Actually, sorry, Stacy, could we let Craig go first? And then we'll go in the order that you listed.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hello, good
Craig,
afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Good afternoon, Chair Landau, members of the council. My name is Craig Schumann. I'm the Marine Region Manager with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'd like to reiterate our support for this funding package to reduce the risk of whale and sea turtle entanglement and fishing gear, as highlighted in our written comments, and take a moment to thank OPC for your continued support on this issue and across a variety of our shared priorities. I'd like to specifically call out and thank Executive Director Eckerle for her tremendous leadership and OPC staff for all of their hard work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Katiana, you have the floor. Katiana, unmute, you have the floor.
Hi, good afternoon, council members, and thank you, Katy, for your presentation. My name is Katiana Johnson, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Natural Resources Defense Council and also as a resident of Santa Monica. NRDC is in strong support of the staff recommendation to allocate up to $1.825 million to support activities that will reduce the risk of whale and sea turtle entanglements in fishing gear associated with the California fisheries. We deeply appreciate the work undertaken by OPC staff to more than double the original funding recommendation for the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation's pop-up gear library. The expansion of the foundation's gear library will boost access to pop-up gear and reduce financial risk for fishers volunteering to participate in state-authorized pop-up testing efforts. This increased financial support will also help to ensure that the large-scale pop-up testing project led by Subsea Sonics is successfully implemented. With 20 fishers signed up, this project will enable new fishers to gain first-hand experience with the gear and provide a data set on its effectiveness, all of which will be vital to inform any future consideration by the state to authorize the gear for commercial use. The gear library, together with the $1.4 million recommended for development of virtual gear marking system, line marking, and continued support for whale entanglement response programs, will greatly expand California's fisheries management toolbox. This will enable more effective resource management decisions that will result in productive fisheries and protected whales and sea turtles in California waters. We respectfully ask that the council approve the staff recommendation for action item 7 in full. Thank you so much for the opportunity to comment today.
Thank you, Katiana.
Lisa, you have the floor.
Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Sorry, thank you. My name is Lisa Damrosch. I've recently become the executive director of PCFFA and wanted to take a quick minute to introduce myself and introduce or reintroduce you all to PCFFA, and also to thank you for the commitment and investments towards whale entanglement mitigation. PCFFA is the Pacific Coast Federation of Fishing Associations, and we're an organization that brings fishing associations together to address the issues that threaten commercial fishing access and our ocean resources. We work in all fisheries and have a long history of advocating for conservation and the future of wild seafood production for the people of California and beyond. As I said, I'm new to this job, but I'm not new to working with and for commercial fishermen. My son is the 5th generation of my family to fish commercially out of Half Moon Bay, and I've grown up in the commercial fishing world and have spent most of my adult life working in support of commercial fishing and commercial fisheries interests. I'm currently a member of the Dungeness Crab Gear Working Group and understand the complexities of the whale entanglement issue. OPC's investment here has been critical, and it's guided by transparent and thoughtful strategy. And right now it's a critical juncture where implementation strategies and results for our efforts are more important than ever. Fishermen realize more than anyone that our fate depends on all of us doing everything we can to reduce this risk. The investments recommended today are generally longer term in nature. Line marking and gear innovation are important steps, but are also complex and will require strong collaboration. Our immediate recommendation is to ask that fishing industry engagement and implementation be a top priority. PCFFA is ready and willing to partner with the state and others to facilitate the meaningful engagement needed to implement these programs effectively. I also just want to take a quick second to elevate the fisherman-led solutions that we are engaging in now and that we would like to grow in partnership with the state. Things such as lost gear and expanding the state permitted program, as well as mobilizing the fleet in concert with the emergency rulemaking for a one-time cleanup event to avoid a second summer and fall with off-season entanglements, and also to expand the fisherman-led survey work that Dungeness crab fishermen have been engaging in to help approach for closing critical data gaps on the location of whales that are informing our ramp process. Again, thank you for your time, and PCFFA is looking forward to working with you on implementing these programs and others moving forward.
Great, thank you so much.
Scott, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Scott Webb, Advocacy Director with Resource Renewal Institute. Won't take too much y'all's time here, but I just wanted to +1 everyone and express sincere gratitude to Director Eckerle and all the OPC staff for getting this done. Yeah, it's really refreshing to come to these things and say, like, wow, how proud I am to be a Californian, and how cool to see this leadership happening on the ground and making collaborative solutions that, you know, will both protect whales and our, of course, our commercial fishing fleet here. So again, thank you very much. You guys are doing amazing work, and yeah, excited to keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Scott, we believe you accidentally muted yourself.
Oh, you know what? That was my way of saying I am done, but thank you all very much.
Peggy, you have the floor.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great, thanks. Hey, I want to, well, first I should introduce myself. My name is Peggy Stapp, and I'm the Executive Director and founder of Marine Life Studies and co-founder of the Whale Entanglement Team known as WET. We're based out of Moss Landing. I want to thank everyone, and I just say ditto to everyone that's gotten up to speak. This is an amazing funding opportunity to promote the protection of whales and other marine wildlife, and also a great collaboration with the fishermen because they don't want the whales entangled any more than anyone else. And kudos to all the fishermen that have already been testing this gear. I can't thank them enough. And Katy, for all your hard work, and everyone on the council. And a big shout out to the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation, because they've been incredible, not only with helping with this project to get the ropeless innovative gear started out on this coast, because that's the way we're gonna kind of mitigate the problem of entanglements eventually. And so I want to say that thank you to them and all the fishermen, and kudos for everything you guys have done. This is just amazing and a very exciting day. So I hope that you will fund this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy.
Ben Grundy, you have the floor.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, members of the council and staff. Ben Grundy with the Center for Biological Diversity, echoing all of the thanks that have previously been shared from other commenters. A special thanks to Katy, Director Eckerle, and all of the OPC staff members for their hard work to make this recommendation action possible. The center is in strong support of the revised staff recommendation and encourages the council to approve the full amount proposed to support the state's effort to reduce the risk of whale and sea turtle entanglements in fishing gear and inform management and entanglement response efforts. We'd like to specifically thank OPC staff for more than doubling the recommended funds for the National Marine Sanctuary Pop-Up Gear Library. This additional proposed funding will directly support the pop-up gear testing efforts that will be occurring this spring under the expanded Subsea Sonics EFP. And the use of these funds to expand the ropeless fishing gear library is critical to increasing access to pop-up fishing gear. The center is also encouraged by and strongly supports the recommendation to provide $200,000 for a ropeless fishing management portal. The development of this portal will help address the significant barrier to potential commercial authorization of pop-up fishing gear. This council and the state have shown tremendous leadership over the years when it comes to mitigating entanglement risk off of our coasts, and approving today's recommended action would be just another example of California's commitment to lead on this issue. And thank you for the opportunity to comment, and best of luck to Katy on her way out.
Thank you, Ben.
Michael, you have the floor. Michael, we see,
we're here.
there you go.
We are here today testifying in support of your staff recommendation and the comments that you've heard thus far. And just want to underscore the increasing interest in this alternative within the fishing industry to alternatives to vertical line traps. This is a highly reliable alternative to the status quo crab and lobster fishing gear world, and this is primed and ready to be implemented. Additionally, the success and efficacy of this gear is attracting other fishers, and we fully expect this approach to continue to demonstrate that it is not necessary for fisheries to entrap and kill whales and other marine wildlife. Finally, I'd just like to comment about Commissioner Jackson's comments related to the budget, that this project, I think, is a really good fit to address the idea of needing to prioritize and identify high-value projects. Implementing this strategy will start in a real way in the water the transition to ropeless gear. Thank you so much for your good work and our strong recommendation to support staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Brand Little, you have the floor.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to provide comment here. I am one of the fishermen that tested under the subsonic EFP last year. And I did it I set out to do it because I didn't think it would work. I had to eat a little bit of crow because it did work. And I did see a viable option for finding a way to bring back some time that we've lost as a California crab fleet. The fleet has been slow to accept it. I, for one, will be the first one to acknowledge that I don't see the need for the gear in the wintertime, but I think the need to adapt to regain a portion of our season that we've lost due to the presence of whale in the spring. This program is absolutely invaluable to us. And the fleet sees that too, with 20 participants now signed up in a waiting list. They're finally realizing we have to adapt. We can no longer avoid this. And we're probably, it's been a taboo topic. And until this point, we're probably at the precipice of fleet acceptance in the concept. And it's so important now, you know, with a fleet that's broken down, that's been hampered by season delays and losing gear and season closures for the salmon. You got a fleet that is really broke right now, and adding this gear library to help these guys and for the OPC to seize the moment of interest to help this move forward, I think is, you know, you got a small window and this is it.
Thank you for your comment.
Kim Sawicki, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Kim Sawicki, the founder of Sustainable Seas Technology. We're a small nonprofit working to reopen fisheries struggling with entanglement issues. Since 2020, our collaboration with Oceana, CDFW, the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation, and the Marine Innovations Gear Alliance has shared research insights, strategic guidance, and direct support to assist in the development and adoption of ropeless gear in fisheries where it is needed most. We're proud to have helped various manufacturers and research teams obtain experimental fishing permits. Notably, we hold an experimental fishing permit for the brown box crab and king crab fishery in California, which will exclusively use ropeless gear. We are so incredibly grateful to OPC and are thrilled to endorse the staff recommendations to expand a pop-up gear lending library. With this momentum, we hope that all gear acquired through this venture will be readily available to fishers with EFPs, enhancing the inclusivity and effectiveness of our collective efforts. We are especially excited about the funding for a ropeless management portal. In 2021, SST brought all of the existing ropeless manufacturers together to agree to put all of their data into one place. This collective is called the Ropeless Manufacturers Work Group, or the RMW. The tool we created is called the RMW Hub. We see a great opportunity to provide this tool to the Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission to give them the data they need for the ropeless regulatory portal you are funding today. We look forward to further conversations on how we can synergize these technologies and our collective expertise to bolster California's fisheries, and are available to share our insights with OPC staff or council members whenever needed. Thank you for your steadfast commitment to protecting our marine ecosystems and supporting the communities that rely on them.
Thank you, Kim.
There are no other hands raised.
Thank you, Stacy. And with that, I would like to open it up to council members.
This is a fantastic collaborative, comprehensive approach. I was particularly excited to hear that there was a waiting list for the gear. I just have a quick question. Are you, maybe this is for Katy, are you aware of any existing programs or projects that that actually clean up abandoned fishing gear that is causing these entanglements? So this comprehensive package of projects is fantastic, but I'm just curious if something like that already exists, aside from beach cleanup efforts when it washes up.
Yeah. So Jenn, you're also welcome to comment to this if you have more to add, but I believe that I know there are several cleanup strategies for abandoned lobster gear. I believe that the Dungeness crab fishing community has banded together to do some of these cleanups in the past. As far as a concerted effort, I'm not fully sure, but Jenn, if you have any further.
Yeah, thank you, Katy. I will first note that lost gear is a priority identified in the state's ocean litter strategy, and so it is an important priority for us. I do think there was a more robust gear retrieval program for addressing this issue in the past. I'm not sure it still exists. I'm looking at Caitlin, my deputy, if she has any insights. No, you got to come to the mic.
Excuse me, sorry. I was trying to direct Katy from the audience. I'm aware of in recent years, last year and this year, NOAA Marine Debris Program has had increased priority and funding related to gear retrieval and removal or of derelict, abandoned gear, essentially. And so there has been federal funding through the various infrastructure and BIL, et cetera, federal funding opportunities. Thank you. Which doesn't mean there's more opportunity for coordination in the future, but that's what I'm aware of in recent history. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great news. Just that there's some funding available, but maybe an opportunity for the council to explore. Thank you.
Yeah, a couple thoughts and then a question, maybe for Director Eckerle. The first is that I agree in applauding both you, Jen, and the staff for being super responsive and proactive to public comment and kind of threading the needle and finding a solution that I think works for this portfolio. The second is that I think, well, this is the final allocation that will come from this pot of funds. I hope that it won't be one of the last investments that we make on this topic, as it's part of the strategic plan. And so we should be pushing ourselves to be thinking about, this is very Dungeness crab heavy, how we think about thoughtful interventions across a number of fixed gear fisheries and other fisheries that emerge as requiring intervention. And then the third one is a question. I think that, a lot of time and thought was put into the entanglement investment strategy. And so I'd love just a little bit more clarity on how the various proposals were kind of vetted and considered. It was interesting here in public comment that there are other, interventions like funding additional surveys or lost gear. I'm just curious what that process looked like.
I'll turn it over to Director Eckerle in a second. I just wanted to address your comment on, expanding this to other fisheries. And so I think that the infrastructure we're building through these packages is one that can be used to apply to a number of fixed gear fisheries. And so is particularly the gear library and that interoperability portal, those can then be used in other fixed gear fisheries in the future. I think that the Dungeness crab fishery has just been the proving ground where a lot of these technologies are being tested. So there's certainly a lot of potential to continue to innovate and support fisheries in the future through those efforts. And I feel like I had something else to say, but it just went out of my head. So I'll turn it over to Jen.
Thank you. And thank you so much for that question. So the recommendations that we brought before you today were, we identified the best use of those funds for accelerated investment now for near-term and longer-term results. We did that work in close partnership with the Department of Fish and Wildlife and with input from other partners. Our recommendations were also directly tied to the investment priorities in our entanglement strategy related to gear innovation, collective partnerships, and response and outreach. And just to put a finer point on how we looked at those decisions, we prioritized investments that would have fleet-wide benefit, would improve tools for enforcement and management, maximize experimentation and standardized data collection and sharing on the efficacy of ropeless gear for Dungeness crab and potentially other fixed gear fisheries in the future, as Katy just mentioned, and to ensure safe and effective entanglement response. I want to assure the council and the public that the spend down of this particular pot of funds does not mean that we will no longer invest in projects that can further address this threat to wildlife in our recreational and commercial fisheries. We understand there continue to be needs and gaps, particularly as it relates to other fixed gear fisheries, and we will continue to evaluate necessary actions to strengthen our policy and management. If we missed a key priority, we want that feedback, and I particularly appreciate the comments from PCFFA about the other efforts that are underway and the priorities where we can turn our focus to going forward. I know that Dr. Schumann from the department is available to answer questions. If there are questions about the importance of line marking and how that's a valuable tool for how we're reducing known entanglements across the West Coast.
Great, thank you both so much for that. Just one more check if there's any additional comments or questions from the council. And if not, I would ask for a motion, and I have some language if anyone wants to borrow it.
Everyone's so quiet.
Could you, so we can do this as a, a motioning for all 4 projects together, or if there's a specific project.
I will make the motion for all 4 projects, and if a council member disagrees, please let me know. I move to adopt the proposed findings for all projects as recommended by staff, approve the projects as described, and delegate to OPC leadership the authority to implement the council's approval.
Any seconds on that?
I'll second.
Perfect, thank you. And with that, Stacy, could I ask you to take roll, please?
Katy Landau,
Aye.
Christina Kunkel,
Aye.
Alexis Jackson,
Yes.
Megan Rocha.
Yes.
The council has voted unanimously. The motion passes.
Great, thank you so much, and Katie, thank you all for all of the work you've done over the last year. And with that, we will move on to the next item. That is a consent item. So there is not, it's item 8, which is the consideration and approval to disperse funds for the 2024 to 2026 California Sea Grant Fellowship Program. So just because this is a consent item, it's a request for authorization to enter into a multi-year contract with the Sea Grant Fellow to maintain OPC's role as the state agency host for the California Sea Grant Fellowship Program. OPC has hosted 12-month paid Sea Grant Fellows as part of this program for over 10 years. And so the reason this is coming up as a consent item today is just because the multi-year contract exceeds the executive director's delegated authority to enter into this contract absent council approval. So we do not have a staff presentation, but we do have staff available for questions. But I just want to ask if any member wants to remove this item from consent and bring it forward to discuss. And if so, we can do that.
I don't want to remove it from consent, but can I say something? Is that okay? Does that doesn't remove it from consent?
Please go ahead.
Just the Sea Grant program is near and dear to my heart. I look around the room and I know there's so many current and former Sea Grant fellows sitting around. I'm a former Sea Grant fellow in 2020, and I just found out my fellow Councilmember Jackson was a Knaus fellow as well. So this program has just been such a huge impact on my own life personally, and it's such an incredible pathway for jobs in the coastal and ocean policy space. So just a plug for anyone that I don't know who's listening, but if you are a graduate student, if you know a graduate student that's interested in coastal and ocean policy, please apply for the next round. I think they do it in the summer time. And I'm just so honored to vote on this, and I would love to make the motion.
Great, thank you. I can't second it, so if looking to someone else to second, if would like to.
I'll second.
Thank you. And with that, Stacy, can I ask you to do another roll call, please?
Yes. Katy Landau,
Aye.
Christina Kunkel,
Aye.
Alexis Jackson,
Yes.
Megan Rocha.
Yes.
Thank you. The council has voted unanimously. The motion passes.
Perfect, thank you so much. And then moving on to item 9, this is public comment on non-agenda items. So at this time, I'd like to invite any members of the public, first in person, and then we'll go to online, that'd like to speak for any items that were not on our agenda today? See one in person.
Richard Sadowski, Homefront EJ. First, I'd like to thank, I'm not sure what agency, but that extended the funding for the AmeriCorps and College Corps program, which they extended for another couple of years. And we're one of the host organizations for the Cal Poly College Corps, and we have 4 interns working on our M-Beam project, the Morro Bay Estuary Air Monitoring Project. And I can't tell you what an encouragement it is to be able to work with the young people and, just sharing experiences. I also like to say that, one of the things, a spinoff that happens from this is that OA several years ago when the OPC had made their action plan, the OA action plan in like 2018, ocean acidification wasn't even, people didn't know what, even the language, and so by having, by bringing it through the College Corps, you bring it into the community and bring that language into the dialogue, and it's so important. And I also want to give a shout out again to our Ecologistics, our fiscal sponsor, and the San Luis Obispo Bay Foundation, who had faith in our project and invested $15,000 for the next 2 years, and we're able to buy new equipment for our interns. And we're hoping to put in the first air monitoring station at the Harbor Department in Morro Bay. That'll also measure not only criteria air pollutants, but atmospheric carbon dioxide, in support with the Cal Poly College Carbon Lab, who are studying ocean acidification in our estuary. And so I'd like to thank OPC. Also, just a shout out for the small grant program that you guys are starting through Justice Outreach. I've listened to a couple of your webinars, and we're encouraged by it. And thank you. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Afternoon. Keith Rootsart. I'm the founder of the Giant Kelp Restoration Project in Monterey. $10 million of research has failed to grow kelp, and the urchins ate it. However, the volunteer community of divers at calling urchins at Tankers Reef in Monterey succeeded in growing 11 acres of kelp at Tankers Reef from scratch in an urchin barren for free. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife, Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, and Ocean Protection Council and Reef Check were our allies. But after 3 years, the government agencies asked the Fish and Game Commission to terminate our project on Valentine's Day and let the urchins eat our kelp, to ask a new question of what happens if the divers stop by making us stop. CDFW proposed a pathway 2 years ago but we can't get a permit because you will not establish a policy. At restoration, a legally allowed activity in marine protected areas is ever permitted. I think the Marine Life Protection Act goal is not to ignore rich, diverse kelp forests becoming pink and purple moonscapes. Leaving MPAs undisturbed is not a goal, but is what happens when you can't afford to care for the ocean, because CNRA only funds half of 30 by 30. Your foolish research is killing 20% of the remaining kelp in Monterey, and your failure to advocate is killing the rest. Please declare a policy allowing urchin calling in MPAs for restoration. Until you establish this policy, I will put down my hammer, and I will pick up my camera, and I will show everyone what you're doing to the kelp, to the fish, to the sea otters. and to ocean stewardship. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Stacy, do we have any speakers online?
We do. We have Walter Lamb, Michaela Miller, caller ending in 5936, and Peggy Stop. Walter has slides, and you have the floor.
Thank you, council members. My name is Walter Lamb at the Binding Wetlands Land Trust. I know that the Ocean Protection Council has had a peripheral but influential role with the Biota Wetlands restoration planning process, coordinating meetings, and we think there may be a request for funding coming down the pike. And this is a picture of a marsh wren that I took just maybe a week or so ago in non-tidal pickleweed marsh, exactly where you'd expect to find a marsh wren like this. In precisely an area that's slotted for excavation for tidal channels. It's nothing against tidal channels, but building them through established non-tidal marsh is somewhat problematic. If I go to the next slide, please. The current thing we want to bring to your attention right now is that regardless of whether folks think this project is good or bad, it needs a federal environmental impact statement. And that's been a source of confusion for a lot of people who don't necessarily know the difference between EIS and EIR. But just going for an environmental impact report under CEQA is not going to move anything forward. It's just going to waste time and money while other efforts could be moving forward. And so just really want to, clarify that. And then the next slide, please. Not trying to be provocative here, but, I understand the point behind cutting the green tape. We don't want for good projects to get unnecessarily delayed, but I think it's gone overboard a little bit, and especially at Biona. And I'm worried that what's happening at Biona is going to kind of give a black eye to the idea of cutting the green tape. And I would liken CEQA and NEPA and some of the Coastal Act and some of these other environmental permitting statutes like parachutes. Yes, they do slow you down, but in a good way, right? They're preventing you from hitting the ground and going splat. And at Biona, this constant desire to circumvent these things has never actually sped up the project. Conversely, it's just slowed it down over 20 years, keep going in circles. So I just will leave you with that. I think we really need to pull back and rethink. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Michaela, you have the floor.
Awesome. Good afternoon, council members. I'm not really sure what happened during the last public comment section, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to comment and offer our support and gratitude on approving Agenda Item 7 for approving the dispersal of funds to reduce whale and sea turtle entanglement. My name is Michaela Miller, and I'm the Conservation Manager with the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation. The National Marine Sanctuary Foundation is the official nonprofit partner to the federal marine sanctuary system, and we work in close partnership with NOAA and other community stakeholders to advance conservation efforts across sanctuary sites and the waters that connect them. We greatly appreciate the opportunity to strengthen and expand our existing gear library to provide fishermen with free access to a broad range of innovative gear types. Expanding the library will enable fishermen to test multiple gear types, collect data on the gear performance, and also provide critical feedback on how this gear can be improved to meet their needs while simultaneously finding solutions to reduce entanglement risk. While investing in prevention strategies is critical, we also greatly appreciate the opportunity to support entanglement response efforts as we collectively work to find solutions to minimize entanglement risks. Ensuring that the members of the California Large Whale Entanglement Response Network are supported and properly prepared when responding to an entanglement is necessary to ensuring the success of responders when rescuing whales. Investing in strategies to both reduce entanglement risk and strengthen entanglement response is important for ensuring the long-term health and conservation of whales in California waters. So with that, just want to say thank you, and thank you to the OPC staff for moving this forward.
Thank you.
We have caller ending in 5936. Caller, you have the floor.
Eileen Bogan, Coalition for San Francisco Neighborhoods. These were the comments that the coalition made earlier today at the Greater Fairlawns National Marine Sanctuary Advisory Council. The Coalition for San Francisco Neighborhoods is supporting the waters off San Francisco's Ocean Beach, as stated in SAC Resolution number 163-2020, to become a non-contiguous area in the Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary. The coalition has also advocated for this at the Coastal Commission, the Ocean Protection Council, and the State Lands Commission. The coalition's advocacy has been both as part of the management plan review and as part of the state's 30 by 30 initiative. Concerns may still exist with the city's combined sewer system. However, the current Oceanside Treatment Facility discharge of 10 to 11 millions of gallons per day will be cut in half when the recycled water project comes online. Resuming the deposition of bay dredgings off Ocean Beach may also be a concern. Related concerns for the Coalition for San Francisco Neighborhoods are sand mining in San Francisco Bay, increasing erosion and accretion on Ocean Beach, and sea level rise may cause saltwater intrusion into the West Side Basin aquifer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Peggy, you have the floor.
Sorry, I didn't unmute myself. This is Peggy Stapp again with Marine Life Studies and the whale entertainment team known as WET. Just one of the council had made a comment before they voted on the bill, and thank you for that. It's so exciting that you funded agenda number 7. But she had mentioned something about derelict gear removal. We had gotten a grant from one of the national foundations, National Fish and Wildlife, and we started that project in the fall of 2019 that went into 2020. And we learned a lot on that project, but then we applied again, like to the NOAA marine debris. And that year they delayed the announcement, and then the budget was cut in half and no one on the West Coast got any of the funding. So if you guys can find it in your hearts and mind for funding, we learned so much on that project, and we have a much better, more efficient way that we can do that because we really studied and looked at everything we did. We hired a couple commercial crab fishermen to pull the gear for us. So we're ready to go. We just need funding. And we've had entangled whales in derelict gear. You know, the sea turtle, the leatherback that was entangled was derelict gear too. And there's a lot of it down there. But one interesting fact, and then I'll go, but is that we actually 2/3 of the gear that we pulled wasn't commercial. It was recreational gear. But their pots are much smaller. They're easily moved in storms with kelp, where the commercial crab pots are much heavier. And anything that we pulled and it was marked, we returned to the commercial fishermen. The recreational gear was not marked, at least at that time, for the derelict that was on the seafloor. And that's where there's no buoy at the surface, because we call all those in, you know, when we see them, when we're out doing our research boat surveys about whales and dolphins. So anyway, if we can get funding, if the state can provide some funding, we're ready to go. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have Amalia Almada. Amalia, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, council members. Thank you for the opportunity for a brief comment. I'm from the University of Southern California Sea Grant Program, our extension leader there. And I just wanted to reflect our written comment that we recently approved 5 projects for funding through our biennial research competition. This on a number of different topics related to OPC priorities, including novel coastal armoring methods, looking at the oil spill in 2021 and what we can learn about ecosystem recovery since then, looking at combined effects of ocean acidification, hypoxia, and harmful algal blooms in California, food security by looking at larval fish, and related to the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary, how we can use traditional ecological knowledge and eDNA methods towards that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
There are no more hands raised.
Thank you, Stacy. Just before we move off of this item, I did just want to turn it back to Director Eckerle for an update on the carrier retrieval program.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to provide some additional information. The Department of Fish and Wildlife and the fishing fleet have established a robust gear retrieval program. So my apologies for not remembering that. We can provide more details to the council on the breadth and depth of that program if that's of interest in a future meeting.
Great, thank you so much. And with that, I will call this meeting to an end, or arrangements for the next meeting before we adjourn. So the next OPC meeting is going to be here in this auditorium and with remote access on Tuesday, June 4th, starting at 1 p.m. And then for those planning the rest of their 2024 calendar, we'll have additional meetings on September 10th and December 9th. And with that, I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you so much.